There's nothing unusual in the procedure at the main gate of this Air Force base as Second Lieutenant David Hackley and his wife arrive for his first operational assignment. But the salute is something that's important and significant, even if it's exchanged thousands of times every day by members of the armed services all over the world. A salute is many things. It's a friendly greeting. It's a symbol of respect for authority, achievement, and tradition. It's one of the many customs and courtesies that foster order, discipline, and efficiency in a military organization. Courtesies are specified in Air Force regulations and must be obeyed. Customs are not set forth in regulations, but compliance is expected of all personnel. Many customs and courtesies will come into play as Lieutenant Hackley goes through the procedures of reporting in. First, the Personnel Processing Center. Here the airman does not salute, though courtesy requires that she rise when an officer approaches. The lieutenant shows his orders and the airman retains a copy for the base records. While the lieutenant signs in, the airman checks to see that his pay records and personnel folder are in order. These will be placed in the base files. Next comes Lieutenant Hackley's most important duty. He must proceed to squadron headquarters and report in. No driver of a moving vehicle, whether officer or airman, as a matter of safety, is required to salute. As the lieutenant passes an airman waiting at the curb, they do not exchange salutes. When reporting to the commander of the squadron, all procedures must be in proper channels. So the lieutenant's initial contact at squadron headquarters is the first sergeant on duty. Courtesy calls for the sergeant to rise. The first sergeant introduces Lieutenant Hackley to Captain Waterman, the administrative officer, who announces him to the commander over the intercom. An appointment is arranged for later in the day, and Captain Waterman advises Lieutenant Hackley to report to the commander at 1300. It is now 1000. The lieutenant has time to do other necessary things. He's anxious to learn whether or not housing on the base is available, so he goes to the base housing office. In many instances, custom decrees that rank is the determining factor. Yes, RHIP, rank has its privileges. In this case, the sergeant on duty tells the second lieutenant that there are 2 captains and 1 first lieutenant ahead of him on the list. So he becomes number 4. But if other officers who outrank him present themselves and request housing, they will be placed on the list ahead of him. Punctuality in keeping appointments is demanded of all Air Force personnel. So Lieutenant Hackley allows himself ample time to reach squadron headquarters for his appointment with the commander. When passing is a valuable symbol of the solidarity that must exist in any military organization if it is to have efficiency, pride, and esprit de corps. Indoors, the salute is proper, but is required only when reporting to a superior officer.
I have an appointment to see the commander.
I'll inform the commander, sir, that you're here, sir. Lieutenant Hackley is here, sir.
Have him come in.
The commander will see you, sir.
Come in. Lieutenant.
All set?
At present, I'm number 4 on the list, sir.
I'm sure they'll take good care of you in a day or two. Any trouble processing in?
No, sir.
Where are you from, Lieutenant?
Pittsburgh, sir, Pennsylvania.
Did you go to college?
Yes, sir, 2 years in engineering.
Any previous experience?
No, sir, but I had 2 years in ROTC.
Lieutenant Craig is here, sir.
Have him come in.
Sir, Lieutenant Craig reporting as directed.
Lieutenant Craig, this is Lieutenant Hackley, Lieutenant Weber's replacement. Show him around the squadron this afternoon and introduce him to some of our personnel.
Yes, sir.
Fine, thank you, gentlemen.
The 2 lieutenants come to attention, salute properly, do a facing movement, and exit in a military manner. As the 2 lieutenants approach a doorway, they see a senior officer coming toward them. It's a common sense courtesy for them to give way. It's Lieutenant Colonel Phillips. The colonel's manner is warm and friendly in welcoming the new member. As they enter the security office, the greeting of Captain Murphy, the security officer, is likewise cordial. The non-commissioned officer on duty goes right on with his work. No saluting, no interruption. In the flight planning room, work is in progress and continues without interruption when the 2 lieutenants enter. No formalities are called for. After all, courtesies, though strictly in order under many circumstances, are also matters of common sense. They are not mandatory when they would interfere with the business at hand. The two lieutenants walking side by side present an example of a personal courtesy always expected of a junior officer when accompanying a senior. Lieutenant Hackley is careful to keep to the left of Lieutenant Craig. Sometimes this to leave the car, which is important on ceremonial occasions. As, for instance, in greeting a distinguished visitor. As a matter of fact, the general is on his way to greet such a visitor now. Even in a moving car, senior officers, when passing within saluting distance, rate salutes from their juniors. And is centered to the rear of the color guard. All members of the formation, except the airmen forming the honor flight, face the point of arrival of the Inspector General's aircraft. All the procedures in such honors and ceremonies accorded a distinguished visitor are the subject of detailed Air Force regulations. A few weeks later, in the flight planning room, Major Davis's crew are meeting for a final review before taking off on a mission. What is the proper way for officers to address each other? Here are Captain Elliott, the co-pilot, and Captain Gorman, electronics warfare officer.
Any special electronics games this time, Chuck?
No, Bob, this will be a pretty easy one for me.
No loafing this trip, though. The old man's going with us.
I think I can do enough to look busy, Bob.
Such use of first names by officers of the same grade is appropriate only when people of other grades are not present. Other members of the crew arrive. Lieutenant Hackley, navigator. Lieutenant Craig, the radar navigator. And Major Davis, the aircraft commander. In such situations, it is permissible for a senior officer to address his subordinates by their last names only.
What's our total fuel on board, Elliot? 200,000 pounds, sir.
What's our scheduled flight time, Craig?
10 hours and 20 minutes, Major.
But as Sergeant Meehan, the gunner, is not of officer rank, his entrance makes a difference. The major is now careful to use military titles when speaking to his subordinates who are officers.
Captain Elliott, what's your landing weight?
195, sir.
Lieutenant Craig, Colonel Foster will be going with us today. This will be a good time to be right on target.
Yes, sir.
Meehan, make sure we have an extra flight lunch on board for the colonel.
But when his superior, Colonel Ashburn, the operations officer, drops in, the major will use full military titles in referring to any of his subordinates, including the sergeant.
Well, Major, ready for a ride with the old man? Yes, sir. Captain Elliott's getting extra equipment for him. And Lieutenant Craig assures us of a shack. Sergeant Meehan will get him a flight lunch. I think we're all ready to go. Fine. Have a good flight, gentlemen.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
This has demonstrated the correct use of military titles, an important courtesy in the Air Force. The term, the old man, may seem informal and unofficial, but when an officer uses it in referring to his commander, it really implies respect, admiration, and often even affection. However, this term is never used in the presence of the commander. When the squadron commander arrives, another courtesy is in evidence. All the crew members come to attention, but the aircraft commander is the only one to salute. In this concept, he represents all the members of his crew. Second Lieutenant Hackley's luck isn't all good, for he has an attack of appendicitis and has to be hospitalized. When Major Davis and Lieutenant Craig come to visit him, two Air Force courtesies are evident. First, officers are not only expected to visit subordinates who are ill, but naturally wish to do so. And there's a general principle fundamental in military conduct. an officer looks out for his men. The second courtesy involves exceptions. The chaplain is a captain, but is introduced as Chaplain Williams. The nurse is introduced as Captain Bowen or Nurse Bowen. Either is correct, just as a medical officer is addressed either by rank or as doctor. Soon the major is saying that the old man has authorized him to tell Second Lieutenant Hackley that orders have come through promoting him to first lieutenant. The interest of Major Davis in Lieutenant Hackley as a member of his crew does not stop here at the hospital. The major's wife calls on Mrs. Hackley, and over a cup of coffee, they have a pleasant visit. Mrs. Davis makes certain that all is going well while Lieutenant Hackley is in the hospital. Lieutenant Hackley soon recovers, and he and Mrs. Hackley resume their normal activities. The ceremony of retreat, held at the close of the duty day, has great symbolic value and a long tradition in American military life. It is the occasion when officers and men together proudly show their loyalty and devotion to our country and our flag.
Squadron, parade, clear! Sound retreat.